everybody. Welcome to the Breakdance Dot Mandala class. This is what we're making today. My name is Tara Lynn Pugh, and I teach dot mandalas for a living. I absolutely love creating mandalas. I love the balance. I love the focus it gives me, and it's one of my biggest passions. So I'm excited to share it with you. Before we get started, I'm going to go over the supplies. So I'll be creating on a stone here. This is about 5 inches. You can create on any 5-inch surface. I'm using a 5-inch round, but you could certainly use a square canvas. You could use any shaped rock. You can really create on anything, a jewelry box, a journal, whatever. I've got 3 paint colors that I'm going to use today. I've got bright orange. I've got a purple. And I have got a teal. This is Peacock teal. I use Decoart paints. I find that they are the right consistency right out of the bottle. I just had some of these left over from a previous project, and so that's why I've got those. But I use Decoart Americana paint. I don't have to thin it or mess with it. It comes out perfect out of the bottle. You can use any acrylic paint. If you're using a different brand, you just want it to be the consistency of melted ice cream or a milkshake. You don't want it to be too thick or it won't move and work properly. And you don't want it to be too thin because then it will run on you. So think the consistency of melted ice cream or a milkshake is what I like to tell people. You want a weld paint palette. I like to use these. You can get them from any craft store, any dollar store. They're inexpensive. Once they get kind of grimy, you can always get a new one, but they clean up pretty easily. But basically, you want something with a little depth so that you can dip into the paint. You don't have to use the same 3 paint colors that I have. If you are excited about using some other colors, break them out, make something that you love. So feel free to substitute the colors. As far as the dotting tools go, I typically will use the Michaels Craft Smart dotting set. And this has all the sizes that I typically use. It has a 12mm tool. I'm not going to be using that today. I've got a 10mm tool, an 8mm tool, a 6mm tool, and then I've got 2 styluses here. And the styluses are the ones with the ball on the end, the ball tip. If you don't have a tool set available, this design is pretty basic and you can really substitute a lot with it. So using a pencil eraser will give you a great medium-sized dot, just to give you an example there. So that is an option. You could use the wrong end of a paintbrush or a smaller size dot. And some pens might also have a good edge that you can use. So feel free to get creative. When I first started dotting, I used crochet tools, and sometimes I still use them. The great thing about crochet tools is they are marked by size. Like this is a 5.5mm. They're flat on one end, and they make beautiful dots. So don't be afraid to look around your house and find substitutes if needed. And then you're going to want a marking tool. So this is a piece of chalk here, and I just stick it in a pencil sharpener. It makes me cringe a little bit when I do it, but it gives me a pencil end to the chalk. And so I like to use that because then it just wipes right off. You could also just use a pencil and then just be real light with your pencil and try to hide it with your dots, and that's fine as well. So if you have not already done so, you want to paint your surface black. Mine is already painted. So I'm going to set that aside before we get started. Go ahead and do that now if you haven't already done that. I'm going to show you a few dotting basics if you have not dotted before. Anytime you use these rod tools, you want to hold them straight up and down at a 90-degree angle. And every time you use one of these rod tools, you're going to dip once and dot once. Oops, I got a hair on there. You dip and dot each and every time, and that will give you similar size dots. Okay. If you don't dip and dot each time, what happens is you start running out of paint and things don't work right. Okay. So dip and dot each time with these rod tools. When you dip into the paint with one of these rods, you want to make sure it comes up over the edge. Okay. We want lots of paint on there. It should kind of have a little dollop on the bottom. And when you swish down, what you're going to do is swish the paint. See how it kind of swishes there? Okay, you don't want to stamp. We're not stamping. What you want to do is kind of just squish the dot a little bit. You barely want to touch the surface if you touch it at all. If you start stamping, what happens is you just get some really messy, squished up dots, and they don't look very good. So just kiss the surface just a tiny bit. All right, the next part is walking the dots. When you walk the dots, you're going to use a stylus tool. Sometimes stylus tools are different sizes on each end. So for example, my green tool here is 3 millimeters and 2.5 millimeters. When you want to walk the dots, you dip once and dot multiple times. And what happens is those dots get smaller in a progression. Okay, what you can do with these dots is you can walk around a circle. So you can curve that, or you can do that in a straight line. So you dip once and then you do what they call walking the dots. So it can be in a straight line or it can be in a curve. And once you do, for example, if you do one side, then you would redip and then you could do the other. And that creates what you would call a petal around that dot. Okay. That's called walking the dots. So you dip once and then you progressively get smaller. Then there's something called a swoop or a swipe. And that is when you use your stylus tool, and you can hold your stylus tool like a pencil. Unlike the rods, which you have to hold at straight up and down 90 degrees, with this one, you can hold it like a pencil. So with a swoop or a swipe, what you would do is dip into the paint, put it, put it on your page, just like you would a pencil, and move it in a straight line. That's called a swipe. So they can go in all different directions, and I just hold it down and move it. I'm not adjusting the pressure. It runs out of paint on its own, okay? So those are straight. Those are called swipes. If I were going to curve those, for example, around this circle, I could put it down and move it around that circle. Again, I didn't adjust the pressure. I put it on my page just like a pen or a pencil, and I move it just like I'm writing. It runs out of paint on its own, and I control the direction of that shape. So you can have a line, you can make it like a comma. Those are called swoops. So this is a technique you can do. So you can practice a few of those. And then another thing that you should learn in dotting is called top dots. So once you have dots on a project, you let those dry a bit, you can come through and you can add a dot on top. When you do top dots, you want your layer beneath to be mostly dry, so that you're not interfering with that. And then you can take paint and make a dot right on top. And those are called top dots. And really, there are some people who will make 3 or 4 different layers of top dots. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So you can also do that with a stylus. And if I let that dry, I could put another layer on top. You just want your top dot to be smaller than the dot underneath. Okay, so those are called top dots. All right, so now that you've got some of those terms down, you can go ahead and get your surface, get your paint ready. Keep the sample here so you can see what we're creating. All right, the first thing we're going to do is make our guidelines. And so for that, I'm going to use chalk. I recommended chalk, or they have this, this is a pastel chalk pencil that comes in wood. You can sharpen this as well. Some other tools that might interest you. The Stabilo All pencil is a little more expensive, but I do use this frequently. All of these things wash away when you're finished, and that's why they're nice. The first thing you want to do is find the center of your circle. And so, or the center of your surface. So whether you're using a square or a circle, I've got mine marked. If you need to, just measure, the total diameter there, and then cut it in half. Once you have your center, you're going to make what I call your cardinal points. So I'm going to make a line going north and south, and do this to the best of your ability. I'm not going to go all the way to the edges because once I get my design started, that helps keep me in place. So north and south. Then you're going to make one east and west. And then we're going to cut those in half. So you're going to end up with a total of 8 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that just helps guide us. It helps us put things in the right place. All right, I'm ready to make my first dot. So in the center, we're going to use an 8mm tool. For me, that's my blue rod. And I'm going to use orange paint. Again, remember when you dip, get it up over the edge. You want plenty of paint on there. Take your time with your center dot, line it up. This one is the most important one. And give that a little kiss. My edges are not perfect, so I'm going to come through with one of my stylus tools and just clean that up a little bit. Once you have your center dot, you're going to want to get one of your styluses. I'm going to work with my smallest, which is 1mm, and I'm going to use the teal paint. Now we're going to create 16 dots, or 16 tiny dots around the center circle, okay? But I'm going to start with my cardinal points: north, south, east, and west. Then we're going to do the halfway in between. So northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest, and that gives us 8. This helps us keep things evenly spaced by doing it this way, okay? Once you have those 8, you can come back through and add 1 in between each of those 8, and that will give you 16 evenly spaced dots. Next, I'm going to switch to my green stylus, which is a little bit larger. I've got a 2.5mm end and a 3mm end. I'm going to use the 2.5mm and my purple paint. This time, I need 8 dots around this circle. So I'm going to do north and south, east and west. That gives me 4. And then the lines halfway in between. That will give me 8. Once you have those down, next I'm going to use my purple rod, which is 6mm. If you don't have tools, 6mm is about the size of a pencil eraser. So I'm going to use 6mm and my bright orange. And I'm going to add 1 dot in the next circle in between each of those purples. So I'm working in the spaces now and not on the lines. So I'm centering it in between the 2 purple dots. We're going to do 8 of these, 1 in each space. I'll wipe that tool off. And then what we're going to do, as you can see here in my sample, so I've got this orange, that circle of orange. I'm going to add these teal pins. And to make a pin, we're using the same tool, the 6mm and the teal. We're going to make a dot in between the orange, which ends up right on a line. And then you can use a pencil tip or you can use your stylus. And you just put it in the center of that dot and pull inward, and that will create a pin. And so we're going to create pins all around by making a circle and pulling the shape. So you make the circle on the line in between the orange and just pull it inward gently. You end up with 8 of those. Then I'm going to pick up my stylus tool. I'm going to use my 2.5mm end and purple paint, and we are going to create these designs next to that pin. So to start, I'm using my 2.5mm end, and I'm going to create a dot just centered right next to that pin. So purple dot centered right in there. Since we have 8 pins, we're going to end up with 8 dots. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to use that same tool, 2mm or 2.5mm, and we're going to create a swoop on each side. So I've got my center. I'm going to dip, swoop to the right. Remember, I just tap it on there like I'm drawing with a pencil, and I move it just like I'm drawing with a pencil. I do it once to the right, once to the left. And I'm going to do that on every pin. If you need to practice a few on paper first, go ahead and do that. And we go all the way around. Next, we're going to use our largest dot for this project. This is 10mm. And I'm going to use my bright orange. Oops. Got my hair everywhere today. All right, so I'm going to dip in bright orange, and I'm going to create a dot in between these teal pins. So we create 8 of those. My orange is a little transparent, so I'm not going to redot all of them, but I'm just going to tap a little more paint in each of these circles, and that will help a little bit with that. So I'm just kind of cheating. I'm gonna get my 2.5 millimeter stylus out again. For me, that's my green one on the small end. I'm gonna dip into purple. And in between each of these areas, I'm gonna walk the dots. So remember, that's dip once and then dot, dot, dot. I can fit 3 in there. So I'm going from the small orange to the large orange. Dot, 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 dot. So we're creating that set of 3. Dip and dot, dot, dot. Dip and dot, dot, dot. And do that all the way around. Around these orange dots, we're going to do the dip or the dot and swoop on each side, just like we did with this teal dot and the purple. Okay, I'm going to use my 3mm tool, which is my green tool on the large end. And I'm going to start with the middle dot in teal. So 3mm, and we're creating that center dot. So dip and dot each of these all the way around. Once you have those center dots, we're using the same tool, 3mm. Dip into your teal paint, and we're going to swoop on each side. So dip in your teal and then swoop to the right and swoop to the left. Dip and swoop to the right, dip and swoop to the left. Repeat that all the way around. All right, next what I'm going to do, I'm going to stick with this 3mm tool, and we're going to create a straight swipe with the orange. So I'm going to work in between these 2 petals here, and we're going to swipe inward towards this purple dot. So I'm going to dip in my orange. Sometimes when I know I'm creating a long swipe, I'm going to double dip. So visually, where I want to be is just outside. So there's kind of this circle here where the edges are of these 2 petals. Visually, that's where I want to start the swipe. Okay, so I'm going to dip and dot right there, and then I'm going to dip and dot again, except this time I'm going to pull it inward, and I have a swipe. I'm going to do that again, dip and dot, dip and pull. I'm going to do that all the way around. You'll see as I'm working, sometimes little drips and mistakes happen. Like over here, I've got 2 splashes. I find the best way to handle that is to leave it, let it dry, and then I can cover over it with the black paint when I'm completely finished. Sometimes the design will cover it and I don't have to worry too much about it. Sometimes it doesn't, but I prefer to cover it up dry and try to erase it while it's wet because sometimes that'll smudge and create problems. All right, so we've got those swipes. I'm going to switch to the 2.5 millimeter, which is just a little bit smaller. And next to each orange swipe, I'm going to make a teal swipe, one on each side. So I'm going to use the smaller side, 2.5 millimeters. And instead of dotting twice, this time I'm just going to dip and dot one time and pull. Dip and pull. And I kind of pull inward to that point. Do that all the way around. There ends up being 16 swipes, 2 on each part. All right, the next step that we're going to do, I'm going to go back to my 3mm tool and we're going to walk the dots in these rays. So we are going to find the teal dot. We are going to dip in teal, dip once. What I like to do is line this up facing me and dot, 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 dot. 4 dots in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do this all the way around. Next, we're going to go back to our 6mm tool and our purple paint. And just beyond this swipe, I'm going to leave a little room and I'm going to add a 6mm dot just beyond that. And we end up with 8 of those. I'm going to get a smaller stylus. I'm going to use my 1.5mm end. I'm going to stay with the purple paint and we're going to create 2 swoops on each side. And it kind of goes from the bottom of this purple towards the teal. And they remind me of little, I don't know, when I created this, I was thinking of little Space Invaders. We're going to do a swoop on each side of that purple. Now, as I'm working here, as you're working, I will mention, I did this. This is the exact same design, okay? I use the exact same tools, the exact same sizes. My design today is a little more compact. I just worked a little closer. When I created it the first time, I worked a little looser, a little farther apart. So understand that yours might look slightly different from mine, and that's okay. It's okay if there are little minor variations. Things can change just based on your mood, where you place things. Dot mandalas are fairly forgiving. So as long as you do the same thing all the way around, it looks fine. So whether you kind of squish it closer or widen it, that's absolutely okay. So give yourself a little bit of grace. Continue working on that design. I'm going to show you what I did for top dots, which is kind of the second layer of this. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. We're going to let this dry just a little bit, and then we're going to come and do top dots. All right, and I am back, and my first layer is pretty dry. It's not completely dry, but it's dry enough that if I touch any of the dots, it's not going to wreck them. We want our first layer to be dry because as we do top dots, we don't want the paint to intermix or to wreck the original design. So that's why we want that to be pretty dry. All right, first we're going to start with our 6mm tool and our teal paint, and we're going to add a top dot right in the middle. Then we're going to switch to our 3mm tool and our purple paint. We're going to add a purple dot, 3mm dot on top of each of these orange circles here close to the center. 8 of those. I'm going to wipe that off, and then I am going to continue using that same tool, orange paint. We're going to add an orange dot on top of the teal pins. So there are 8 of those. Now, you can leave those as dots, or if you want to, you can do as I'm doing here, and you can grab your tiny stylus tool and you can pull that into a smaller pin. On my sample, I kept them on dots, but I just wanted to show you a little variation here. So if you want to create pins with those, you can create top dot pins. Then next I'm going to add a 6mm purple dot on top of each of the large orange dots. We're going to go all the way around. There are 8 of those. And then finally, I'm going to get my 3mm tool back out, and we're going to add an orange dot on top of the purple. So there are 8 of those. Now this is just how I did top dots. You can absolutely top dot however you want to. There are no rules in art. So feel free to do it as I do it, or make it your own, top dot however you want to. It's a fun way to be creative and make the design your own. So feel free to change it up. You can even add a 3rd layer of top dots if you'd like to. And there you have it. There's our breakdance pattern. Now, what you want to do is go ahead and let this dry. Once it's dry completely, you can see I still have chalk marks on there. I can just use a wet baby wipe, a wet paper towel, just some water, and I can wipe away those chalk marks. If you want to varnish it, I highly recommend Decoart Americana Triple Thick. You put it on nice and thick, it's going to dry to a nice, bright, clear coat. Let me show you. I've got one here that's nice and shiny. So this was the Decoart Triple Thick that I used. Of course, you can use any varnish that you prefer. But I would love if you would share it with me. You can add a picture to my Facebook group, Dot Mandala Artist USA, or you can tag me on social media at Tara Lynn Pugh Artist. And I can't wait to see it. Thank you so much for participating, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.